Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sick of the Show Intelligent Masculinity series. I'm Nick Paro, and I am joined by my good friend and repeat colleague across the board in so many things with me here on Substack, especially our notes of the week, is my good friend Walter Rhein of I'd Rather Be Writing, who's our level 36 magic user. And like I said, good friend, Walter, how are you today on this Thursday morning?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. We've adopted in our household. We're turning off our cell phones at 5. And it's just been one day and like, oh my God, I feel so much better today than I did earlier this week, and just forcing myself to take some rest. And it's like we're in this fight, we're in this battle, it's not gonna quit. But getting that little rest, giving yourself that little break is critical. And I was pushing myself a little too hard. I realized that over the last couple weeks, where like too close to tears every single day. And it's just like come back this morning with a little bit more energy. So I'm happy about that. And so happy to see all you wonderful people in the chat. Thank you guys for being here. Love you all.
Yeah, agreed. Hit the hearts as you come on in, y'all. We're just gonna monologue and dialogue for a couple moments as we introduce the show, let everyone know what's going on, say hi, catch up on some of the events real quick before we go into anything. But this discussion is going to be pretty focused. I have another interview following this with Dr. Eric Lulov. So
Oh,
Walter and
good.
I are going to actually stay on schedule
All
today,
right.
which is hard for us. We've got an hour, so I'm not worried about it. But um, there was another shooting incident in Minnesota last night. An immigrant was shot in the leg, and then things escalated and have deteriorated in Minnesota. And people like the Deputy Attorney General of the U.S. are saying that it's insurrection, and somehow that Tim Walz is the head of this insurrection. What they're implying, which is really rich that they would try and claim that the prior vice presidential candidate is an insurrectionist in any way. Like that's rich coming from them.
Yeah.
But there were some escalations, and we had to talk about it. Last night, I jumped on with Wajahat Ali and Lev Parnas and Ellie Leonard, or right after Ellie Leonard joined them, and we talked about that and what's going on with some of the Epstein dump and the finding of Michael Cohen's name in the document, not by Ellie, but by someone in the community who then forwarded it to Ellie and was like,
Mhm.
"Hey, I found this. This seems really important. What what do you say here?" And Michael hasn't given any good answer. To be totally honest,
Yeah.
is he hiding something? I don't know. Is he
Well,
being super fucking deflective? And
yeah.
is he avoiding every single question about it? And is he verbally attacking the people who ask him those questions? Yes. What does
Mhm.
that indicate to me as a prior interrogator is he is more than likely lying and he has something to hide. What that is, I cannot say. Whether he is hiding something that he personally did or was involved in, or things that he knows, he needs to speak the truth now. Truth to power, man. Like the words, the truth, it
Mhm.
will set you free. You will feel better. Walter and I, you and I, we talk about this all the time. Is truth will set you free, and this bleeds into the soul of intelligent masculinity is being able to accept your faults. And so before we get it, and so Michael Cohen, please come forward and speak the truth. Reveal everything you know, any connection you know, anything, because it's not for you, it's for the victims. It's for all of the
Yeah.
victims. And it will help you. You will feel better, and the people around you will welcome you in more because they know you are repenting actively. And we don't have to forget, but we can forgive if you're willing to just keep the work going and doing it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Masculinity is a day by day process, Mike. So live it. Um, and
Absolutely.
So, Walter, I'm going to introduce this topic real quick then is intelligent masculinity, y'all. We're doing the Be a Man Intelligent Masculinity series with my fundamental thesis that I'm building in all of this, and I'm framing it for a lot of articles as well that I'll be writing up after this limited series is over. I may turn it into a full, just continuing series after, but I'm for now, the initial segment is through January and February. And the core theme that I want to get in the heart of my understanding, and I'm going to start talking about this in all of our shows for intelligent masculinity, is intelligent masculinity is the refusal to outsource accountability onto others and the discipline to live with the consequences of your values and actions. And so, with that framing, Walter, I want to welcome you to intelligent masculinity and ask you our first question today, which is,
Excellent.
and this is going to be a two-step question because it always ends up being a two-step question, and I love it. Who has been the most influential male figure in your life and why?
Yeah. And first of all, before I get started, I just want to do a shout out to his name was Sherrod from last week. Is that
Sherrod.
right? Sherrod. And he was so great. I was out skiing and listening to him. This kind of came on when I was skiing, and he said he was 19, and it just brought a feeling to me that I can't even really express. It was just like good for you, man. It's just like a good, and I was just, I don't know, it made me feel happy, and I don't think I've had that feeling before. What I felt, and I was just proud of him. So I'm just Sherrod, good for you. But yeah, I thought so. I'd been listening, and I heard this question, and I started thinking about it, and it was hard for me until I realized it doesn't have to be a positive influence.
Yeah.
And then I realized the most influential person is my dad, and it's just not even close. And I was thinking about it, and it goes back a long way, and I've always known that he was kind of tormented by a lot of beliefs that hurt him and hurt the people around him. Even when I was very young, he knew he was like this. And I've always tried to just kind of get him off that path with these kind of gentle ways, but I was powerless. But even my mom said to me just a couple years ago, she's like, you always knew, like the way you behaved, you always knew. And she was kind of surprised by this. But I want to put it in the form of an example. Like the first time I really knew I was in for it is when we were driving along. It was just him and me in the car, and I was maybe 7 or 8, or I don't know how old. And I was just leaning forward. I was like looking up because it was this one of those big cars, back, this would have been early 80s, one of those big cars where you're kind of leaning forward to look at the stars, and I'm just like still new to the world and excited about seeing the stars. And I was just captivated by the stars. And he says, he's like, hey, don't lean forward like that, don't lean forward like that. He says, I might have to stop suddenly, and you'd crash your face. And I was just like, whatever. But I was just so captivated, I kept leaning forward. And it's one of those cases, and this is the toxic masculinity thing. Once they've given an order, then it loses all reason. Like if you do something that appears to be defiance, once they've given this order, they have to retaliate. So we were still driving along. I was leaning forward, and he slams on the brakes hard enough to smash my face into the dashboard and gives me a bloody nose. And I remember this, distinctly. And I was young enough yet where I didn't know what abuse, being abused was, or being hurt was. What are these concepts? And I just looked. I'm like, why did you do that? And he looks at me and goes, well, there was a deer. This is what he says. I'm like, there wasn't a deer. And then he insists, there was a deer. And even later, he would tell this story. Yep. And people are already saying. And the thing about this is that over the years, I've found, because there's like this certain sense of ambiguity, right? It's his word versus mine now.
Yeah.
And over the years, I've met so many people that are like, well, that's your father, and you don't know for sure that there wasn't a deer and all this. And just that line of pressure. And I just really want to, if that kind of came into your head, you're like, well, you don't know, maybe there was a deer. And if that thinking came into your mind to defend him, even though you weren't there either, it's like, ask yourself, where is that coming from? Why is it that in the, only having heard my side of the story and then his response, so many people they go to this conclusion that, well, you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. That's what they say. And I want everybody to recognize saying that enables abuse. It's an enablement of white supremacy and toxic masculinity and all those things. And it's just been one of those things where I've gone through life and I was like, no, there wasn't a deer there. And I've told this story to people. I've told it to coworkers, and they're like, well, that's your dad, you can't. And then I've taken them out, driven them home. I'm like, hey, look up there. Then slap on the brakes so they smash their face. Like, no, it's not. And then they come up and screaming. I'm like, oh, well, there was a deer. Well, there was not. So it's sort of like you can't get straight information from people because when you talk to people, they'll tell you you're being unreasonable. All right, that's what they say. Let's put them in the same situation. All of a sudden, something's completely different. And I mean, this wasn't, I'm doing that when I'm 16 and 17 to adults. I'm not doing that to kids. But you're trying to build your worldview. And I'm not critical of people too. I'm not critical of people too for immediately having their brain shift. Well, I got to give them the benefit of the doubt because the reality is probably for about 40 years of my life, I gave him the benefit of the doubt and I was withholding. I'm like, well, maybe there was a deer. But then I realized after I came up, with my bloody nose and I looked at him, he never said, oh my gosh, are you okay? I'm sorry that happened. It was just him defending himself. And that to me is the evidence that there was no deer, that he got it in his head to tap the brakes to teach me a little lesson, which is reckless. And he did it harder maybe than he intended to. But intent, he is another person too, who tries to defer and his intent and said, well, I know you got hurt from this action, but because I didn't intend for you to be hurt, then you can't be mad at me. And it's been a long, long process. Yeah, Jack says, did we have the same dad? Maybe we did, Jack. Who knows? But I mean, these are things working through this. And for a lot of my life, you're in this cloud and, I'm like, okay, I have to deal with this. And I've never been a person that would just burst into tears. But looking back, there were a lot of times he gave me he hit me when I was first time I played catch with him in a football. He drilled me in the face and gave me a bloody nose there. He slammed my hands in the door of a car once. I thought, and I never cried because of these moments, but it's like, I remember that door slamming on my hand. We had these vans with the old doors you slam shut. And it was just him being reckless. I was like getting in and he slammed the door because we were in a hurry. And I'm like, did you just break all my fingers? And they all got all big. And he threw me in a lake one time and I hit the ground. I saw the leaves come up and the dirt got embedded under my eye and we had to go to the hospital and they cleaned out. I mean, they took me to the hospital. I guess I should be grateful for that. But there's this sequence of things like that where I'm always getting, beat up and bloodied and it's always an accident. And, and that's sort of like, you can't be mad at me because I didn't intend to do that. It's like, well, why does it keep happening then? And I went into my own duty as a dad. It's now I'm the dad, and it's a reform this world, bringing my kid home in her little basket. I'm like, well, I'm just not going to draw blood here. I'm not going to be responsible. And I've never, given my daughter a bloody nose and I've never slammed her hand in the door. And I made a deliberate choice so that these things didn't happen. And I'm not going to sit there and defer to this kind of weak idea that just because I didn't intend to do it doesn't mean that, you can't hold it against me. And I guess I really didn't fully understand what was going on. I mean, I was in my mid-30s when we finally had kids. And there was just this, because there's always this external pressure and all the random people you meet. When I was growing up and I was in my 20s and, it's like, that's credit to, I keep getting his name wrong, Sherrod.
Yep.
Because you meet, I mean, when you're his age and when I was that age, every person I meet, they're like, well, you only get one dad. And it's just this constant wall of pressure about how, you shouldn't think those things. You shouldn't, how dare you even question that person? And I was just like, well, that doesn't seem right to me. And I was just kind of holding it in the back of my mind, but not really sure how to act on it. But then when I had my own kids, there was just this instinctive, that second level of thought that he would not be in their presence because I didn't trust him to not hurt them, to like slam their hand in a door or get them to draw blood. And he was going to say that he didn't do it intentionally, but that's not acceptable to me. They can't
Yeah.
have to feel that. So I guess
Yeah.
that's a long story.
No, I appreciate you giving that long story because it gives a lot of really good context. And what it also provides to me is um, it fits in with something that I tell my kids, and my son hates it when I say this, but I'm going to keep saying it to him over and over and over again because it's the same lesson that you just mentioned: is do or do not. There is no try. You do the thing or you don't, even if you don't intend to do it. If you hurt somebody by accident, you still hurt them, whether you intended to or not. So do the action or don't do the action. There is no try to do the action. You've either done it or haven't. And so to my son hates it because he doesn't like that I use that and I say it like that. I'm like, and I keep reminding him, like, it doesn't matter if you did not intend to, you still did it. You
Mhm.
have to acknowledge the wrong
Yes.
that you did no matter what. And Mike in our chat right now is saying it's okay to make a mistake, but we need to own them. Exactly. We can't outsource our accountability onto
Yeah.
others.
And
And just 1 second on this is sorry to interrupt you, Walters. Your story hit me because I've done a similar act, but not in a malicious way. I have pre-warned my children, hey, you've got your seatbelts on. This is it. Let's say you are doing something unsafe. You got your both feet up, you're leaning at a really far angle. I'm going really slow right now. I'm going to hit my brakes a little bit, and you're going to feel what happens. And then we're going to talk about why you need to sit up. And it was always there is a lesson that we are actually trying to learn on safety. And if you're sitting in this position, say like leaning super far back and the seatbelt's semi behind you, like what's the difference if I stop a little bit hard compared to if it's in front of you? So now you need to wear your seatbelt so that it's in front of you so that you don't fall so far forward. But I'm never going to do it hard enough to hurt you because I don't want to hurt you. I just want you to know this is why seatbelts are
mm,
important because kids, my generation and younger, of kids shamed their parents into wearing seatbelts. So I'm not going to let my kids not wear them too.
mhm, mhm. Well, and that's being a responsible parent. That's under controlled
Yeah.
circumstances. So and it's like sometimes you do say things. It's like, let me reflect. Does this thing that I
Yeah.
did it aligns
And
to
I had
that?
to reflect on it too. After I
Yeah.
did it, was like, was this the right thing to do?
Oh,
I
and
still think it is
it
because
is.
my kids don't do those actions anymore and they know why. There's always a why.
And it's so
Like to
important
me,
to
that's important.
yes, and it's so important to reflect on it because I think a perversion of the same process went through my dad's mind because he was like, "Well, I have to teach him this, otherwise he's going to be hurt," you know. But then he did it in a way that was extremely reckless, and he didn't actually do it for my benefit. He'd do it to answer his own kind of irritation that I wasn't complying. You know, it was a comply. It should have complied, kid situation, which you hear all the time. If you want to, if you're wondering where the origin of that is from, but I also think there's another part of this story, another aspect of it I think is really important because I just remember the look on his face and the persistent denials. And if he would
Mhm.
just come forward, we can't heal. I mean, it's not something I'm going to let go. You know,
Yeah.
at some point, if he wants to repair a relationship with me, it starts with "There was no deer. I apologize." That has to be the starting phrase, and he's dug in on that. He insists there was a deer. He needs to admit that. But the other thing too, and something I've remembered with my own kids, is that even though they probably think, oh, he's too young. He's too young. He's not going to remember this. Well, I remember it. And I've looked back at a lot of things. I remember a lot of things. I remember everything. And so when I'm with my own kids, that helps me be mindful of my own accountability because it's not going to be, oh, well, because that's always the easy path, the coward's path. Oh, they just won't remember. Let's just carry on because they do remember.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that they are going to come into their power and they're going to be more powerful than you, too. And, and you've got to teach them to be a person who handles their power and who doesn't pass on abuse. And so it's just all these things. There is accountability for this, even when you're hurting a little kid and you've got it in your head that you're this patriarchal ideal that is so celebrated in the United States to the detriment of all, that nobody's above the law, and there's accountability beyond. There's the dogs. There's
The dog
accountability
bells are going
beyond
off.
what human beings recognize. So just, it's important to every day be humble and to hold yourself accountable, because somebody's going to, and that'll build up unless you do.
Agreed. And I'm glad you gave an answer that wasn't a positive person in your life, but still provided. It's trash day, so they're coming. The dogs are mad that the trash trucks are outside. But I'm glad you have that reflective nature within you, and you were able to provide us a great learning lesson out of all of it too. Is like, be reflective when you do actions and apologize when you've done wrong. Like, you don't have to hold on to a lie for the rest of your life if you know it's hurting other people. Like, just let it go. And so I want to move into, because we have to stay on kind of schedule, is as much as I'm going to ask you this short second part of the question, is who is the most influential female figure in your life?
Oh, it'll be my wife. My wife and my kids are probably close second and third. And it's been that process. She's taught me so much just about, especially now. We came to the United States and I didn't have the awareness. Well, it was the Obama era, and I thought the United States had turned a corner and that this was a safe option. And of course, it's like, well, let's get that US passport. Then if something bad happens there, we can go anywhere and we will have this. And just being able, she is a person, and I think it's funny because I think she takes no shit. My wife, she takes no shit. And I think even though sometimes she expresses remorse at this, I think it's a big part of the reason that I'm with her, because she holds me to such an extreme standard. And it's good because I have all these habits from growing up with my own family. I mean, we would sit together and, it was like they would mask interaction and affection by screaming insults at each other. And that was just the way things were done. And so those things become rooted in your identity. That's your habit. And I have to be mindful. I constantly am mindful of it. I can be quick-witted and I can cut people down really fast. I don't like to be that person. I like to be a kind person. But if I am not deliberate, I can make quick, mean statements. And I've gotten pretty good at eliminating it. But if something slips out, it's barbed, my wife always tells me, and she gets very upset about it. So I have to maintain a very high standard to keep the peace, and we keep the peace in our house very well. I mean, there's moments we have our tough times too, and those moments of reflection are very important. But yeah, I give her credit. She holds me accountable, and I need that. And I've gotten a lot better. And then my kids too, just because what you see with them is, just pure, love and kindness and compassion and all the things we're told that human beings can never be. And all I've done is the opposite of what everybody says when it comes to raising your kids, and they're like terrible twos. And everybody just insists. And there's this line of all these, oh, it's going to be bad when this happens. And I'm telling you, if you raise your kids with positive masculinity and it just keeps getting better and better. Your kids become kinder and more capable. And I think a lot of these misconceptions people have about being a parent is because they just think there can be no other way. They're teaching sarcasm. They're talking to their kids this way. And then when their kids do come into their power, now they're impossible and they're unruly because they're fed up with your bullshit that you've been teaching them. It's all come from the parent. It's not there in the kids. The kids are beautiful and wonderful. And so just the more people can, and it is heartbreaking though how few kids are like that. I get so many people are just like, your kids are so respectful and nice and just fun to talk to. But then they won't listen to me with my tactics that I use because it's just so contrary to the ideology of the United States. So my wife and my kids, I think that's the best answer I could give.
I love it. Thank you, Walter. So building on that, what you've I've given you my definition of, or my thesis of, what I think intelligent masculinity is. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think you said it wonderfully. I think the accountability is so important, and it's exactly like you said. I've seen in my dad, and this was a path I kind of walked down myself, where you start developing the self-image of yourself. Oh, I'm this character from that movie. I'm this supreme thing, and then when a real life event happens to disprove that, you have to deny that reality in order to maintain your self identity until it gets to the point, and then you're pushing the people around you, to just deny reality for the sake of your own ego.
Hmm.
And that's when you get into these talk, because people can't take it anymore, because that cuts off growth and makes growth impossible. Because unless you go face to face with your flaws, but it also means, because so many people, they get to that point where they've been in it for so long that just the idea of making them hold themselves accountable to something crushes their own sense of identity. So it becomes like a matter of pain, and then they lash out at you and they create even more problems. And so it's so important. Honestly, I went to Peru when I was 26. I had to kind of rewire my brain there. And it was I think anybody can make progress at this, but it was really difficult. I mean, it takes a long time to rewire that. And you just have to get to that point, because to build up this mythos of yourself, and then to have to confront something that shows you that mythos isn't true, and to just kind of separate through all that and to figure out again who you are is really challenging. And just to accept that you can be loved even as a flawed person is, I think, something most people can't do. People that have recognized, because sooner or later, if you're in a relationship, and this is why we have relationships, some relationships last 50 years, but I think a lot of these toxic men, it's a maximum about 6 years is the best they can do, because at first you're coming in with this big ego and this big attitude and love bombing, and you probably got lots of cash and whatever, and it's just like, okay, I'll take you at face value, that seems really impressive. But when people are living with you day to day and you're sharing the same bathroom, I mean, they're seeing things about you then, and it's like that mythology of you can't survive anymore. And I think that's why these toxic men have their relationships collapse, because the people they're with are intelligent people who can see the reality. And then there's that other dark side of it, where because they know that if the people in their lives rise to a certain level of awareness and power, they'll be able to see through their veil of illusion. They deliberately hold their loved ones down, and they prevent them from growing. And so then this is just various levels of different abuse. So yeah, just that accountability. Somebody asked, how do you deal with the narcissist father? I mean, you step away. You got to get him. You got to get away. You can't put up with that. And I talked to, like, before the holiday, so many people were heading out. There was putting on their armor to go to these hostile family gatherings. And I'm like, you know what? If you get in the car, if you're physically sick, if you don't want to go, don't go. Send a text, say you're sick, say you got the flu, but don't go. And and all this social pressure, though, that we have to tolerate that kind of abuse. But yeah, I mean, accountability is the heart of it, and recognizing that you can make mistakes and that people will still love you even after you've made mistakes is a hard thing for a lot of people to learn, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the keys to, especially around like holiday stuff, and taking and letting people be removed from your life, um, is
Yeah.
draw a line in stone, not in the sand. Don't put a line in the sand where it can be easily pushed away and moved. Draw a line in stone. Walter and we talk. You and I talk about this all the time on Notes of the Week, is about like putting your foot down and putting a foot in the stone and saying, this is what you will not cross. And if you cross it, if you say go to those gatherings, and if somebody crosses that line, you tell them,
Yeah.
hey, this line has been crossed. And if you do it again, or right immediately, hey, this line is crossed, we're leaving. And we will not come back until you apologize in earnest for what you've done and mean it. And if
Mm-hmm.
that's never, that's on
Yep.
them.
It
But
is.
you have put the emotional onus off of yourself. You have kept your center. You have kept your moral strength and your moral authority and your ethical authority.
Mm-hmm.
Is you set a boundary and you keep it, and people will recognize that. And that's accountability, because now you've put the accountability back on the person it belongs to, not
Yeah.
on you, the victim.
Yep.
And I love that you talk about that, is the correct placement of accountability.
Yep. And I want to just say too, they want to entice you into, being a conspirator of their delusion. Like with my dad trying to make me, it's like, oh, it could be so easy if you would just say there was a deer, when I smashed on the brakes and if you just said that, then we can go forward. And so I just didn't bring it up. There was a lot of things I didn't
Hmm.
bring it up, but I never once believed there was a deer there. And it's just, a lot of people, they just get to that point. And this is what we're seeing on the wider scale in the United States right now too. If we just comply with everything that's going, there's this illusion. And I think that was part of, I was talking like my family, we were just having a talk last night about how hard things are in the United States right now. And one side of frustration is, it's like, if you just do what they tell you to do, there's that illusion, that sense, that hope that, okay, it won't be so bad. And I
Hmm.
have to say, it's like, it's unless we stand up to this, unless we demand that we're treated decently, they're going to abuse us. And I mean, my experiences in life have taught me that. And
Yep.
yeah, it seems like it's easier to just comply. It never is, and if you establish boundaries, like you said, and they refuse to obey your boundaries, they've made that choice to leave. It's not you. So you can be free of that. But yeah, you have to stand for what's right. That's the only way to do it. 50
Yeah.
years later, I've learned that lesson.
Yeah. Timothy Snyder said it really well in his book on tyranny, in his 20 lessons, is do not obey in advance. Don't obey in advance. Don't obey, which means set a boundary. And if that boundary is broken, make it known that that boundary
Yeah.
was broken
Yeah.
and how it affected you. Like Sherrod said last week when I interviewed him, it was like, you need to be willing to say, this affected me in this way. I feel this. Use your I statements. People
Yeah.
will be shocked by it. But it also makes a really big impression because you were actually talking about your feelings.
Yeah.
Um, and so this leads into my next question, is how do you model that intelligent masculinity in your own life?
Yeah. I think the first thing I did that really made an impact, that kind of got me on this path, was just I was having all these conflicts with people. And, if you're like what you just said, if you're making these I statements, a lot of people are really quick to just kind of deflect. And there's all these strategies. I'll have to kind of brainstorm all these strategies people use, but some people are really, really good at it. And my dad is brilliant at it because he's an intelligent person. He's really smart. So just like deflecting you back into this other place where all of a sudden it's your fault again, and just like all these conversations, especially when they're just not arguing honestly with you, and they're just looking for ways to turn your words back against you. I've been in those situations a lot, and it's like all the people watching. Oh gosh, I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, it's easy to say this stuff as we talk about on this podcast, but when you get out into the field, you're going to encounter just really deceitful tactics. So the
Hmm.
first thing that I did that really started to actually provide me some insight when I was maybe 14 or 15, it's like it's like, well, what is it that they're doing that makes me most upset? And it was the fact that they would never be accountable. And so I was like, well, okay, but then you get caught in this cyclical thinking where it's like, well, if I admit I'm wrong, then they have some sort of power over me, right? And so then you're reluctant. So then that's how they draw you into being like them, because you've sensed it as vulnerability, which it is not, but you don't learn that at
Hmm.
first because from the outside looking in, and when you're surrounded by that, that's what it seems like. So I was trying to come up with a strategy to how do I resolve some of these conflicts, but at the same time maintain my own sense of self. And I came up with, every time there's a conflict, there's something I did that's not right. And so I would assign a percentage to it in my mind. I wouldn't tell that to anybody. And I'd say, it's like, okay, the 10% that I did, I think it's 90% on them. I didn't tell them this, but I'm like, it's not, but I did do this one thing wrong. My voice was harsh at this point of the conversation. So I would separate that in my own mind and say, okay, it's, even though they are mostly at fault, I'm still accountable for this act that I did. So I would go to people and say, I apologize for this part of that conflict. I did this. I shouldn't have done that. That's it. Never saying anything about percents. And I found you get two responses to that. One response are the people who say, oh, once it's started and now we're offering an olive branch and we're willing to have an exchange. And they'll say, oh, well, I'm sorry for this. And what I found that is amazing is once they were willing to admit that they did something wrong, I was able to see, okay, actually, this other thing I also did was wrong. So I'm like,
Yeah.
and so then it builds, and it's like, okay, we can be open about this and we can work together mutually. But the other group I found, the second response is, well, I'm glad that you're finally coming around, and this is something you got to work on. And there's this part where when you're up against these, toxic people, they have an image of who you are in their brains that they want you to recognize and accept as the true version of you. And it's this hostile, terrible thing. But there are also people who have trained themselves to not perceive reality. So what they have to do is every time they hurt you, they have to come up with some sort of a justification about how that hurt is a part of your essential character that they have some greater responsibility to punish, that they're like warriors of justice and you're just this evil thing. And until you accept that you are this version of evil that they've developed for you, there can never be you'll never, and that's why we never have people saying, hey, good work. They never give you any applause. There's never any support. And so this was just a really convenient way for me to kind of separate those people out. Like the people that were willing to honestly work were the ones that when I said I'm sorry, they said they were sorry back, and then we continued. And when I said I'm sorry, and the one said, well, I'm glad you got a lot of stuff to work on about yourself, get to it. Those were the people I'd be like, nope, it's done now. I found out everything I need to know.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And it's also something that, again, we've talked about is like the idea of guarding your emotional boundaries is you're allowed to let people go. You can guard your emotions. You can guard your um self. You don't have to keep people who are toxic in your life.
Yeah.
You can also bring new people into your life. We like our friend Evan Fields in the chat. Go
Hi,
subscribe to
Evan.
Evan. He's awesome. He's one of
Yes.
our good buddies. You'll be seeing him also on an Intelligent Masculinity interview Monday next week, I believe it is. And then we've got our Diogenes Club, our
Yeah.
men's club, which is going to be super fun next week as well. So I'm so excited to talk about that, Walter, because you've got a cool story for that one when we
Yeah,
get
I'm
to the
looking forward to
club.
telling that. Yeah.
And so this is going to be so much fun. We're building the masculine role models around us that we want. Like that's what I want. I want people like Walter in my life. And I
Thank you.
want to
Back at you.
have friends like Evan in my life and Dr. Eric Lulov, who is coming on next in my life, because they model pieces and greater concepts of intelligent masculinity that I also want to learn off of. I learned from Sherrod Swaney last week, who again is 19 years old.
Yeah.
I'm 36. I learned from him quite a bit on what he taught. Walter has taught me more things and helped me expand in my definition. And I held on to your quote, and I'm going to make sure this is like the first quote that goes into the recap is you can be loved even as a flawed person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with that quote in mind, with your own quote in mind, I'm going to ask you the next question is what do you do to self reflect and self evaluate, knowing that you are flawed?
Yeah, I write. It's sort of like if you ever the people wondering, that's why there's loads and loads and loads of writing that I produce. I don't even expect everybody to read everything that I write because I can't even read it all. There's so much, but it's that constant process, and there's just so many different ways of looking at things, and actually, just plotting things out, journaling and stuff, looking at things, reflecting on these moments. There's so many times, and it's so complex where you think you have an understanding of something, and then I'll put it in a different model. I was talking about this with Will Fullwood, and Will has said, he told me at the end of the year, he's like, it's so nice to talk to me, he says, because so many people just won't listen to him. And we've talked a lot about racism, and especially, as a racialized black man, you say white supremacy, they'll say the cops are going to kill me, and white people are like, well, they start passing it off, and they're just not kind about it. And he said that he thanked me for listening to him, but then I remembered early in the year how there were times when I'd be talking to him and I could sense he was getting frustrated. And so I'd spend the week. It's like, why was he frustrated? And I'd try to create other models because sometimes you can't see things, but there's a real easy model. Like you just think of things from another person's point of view. And that's what I started with this whole thing. It's like, what behavior do I want to see in other people at me? And now I'll just do that for other people. It's just an easy thing. You have to make that kind of switch because you can be stewing in your own juices. You can be sitting there. Why isn't this happening? But it doesn't get you anywhere. And just being able to break things down, looking at things in different ways, you create different kind of like mental models of how things might be. And that's just an easy way to over time. And I mean, this growth, it's not like this is a 2-hour meditation. This is a lifelong process. And that's another thing because people get really frustrated and it's just don't, have grace. It takes years to learn like physics. You're trying to learn, all the physics. You're not going to get that in a half-hour meditation. And that's okay. Give yourself 10 minutes to think about it, put it aside for a while, do your other stuff. And then sometimes just without consciously working on it, you make progress on another level of your being and you start to put these things into effect. You start to see how they go. And a lot of times we're just trapped by these things that we assume to be true, which are not true. And if you just, the biggest one though, just start saying you're sorry. I mean, just for something minor, apologize for something minor, say the words, and it's just amazing. It gets easier, but even with everything I talked about before, and I had always resolved because my father never apologized for anything ever. And I'd always resolved that when I made a mistake with my own kids, I would say I was sorry. And I remember the first time that I made a mistake. And even with everything that had happened to me, it was a little bit challenging. Just say it. And all the thoughts, and I recognize these as the arguments my dad probably had, like, oh, they won't remember, or all this, or I'm the dad, all that stuff went through. And I'm like, none of that has served me. I remembered myself as a little child again, and I gave what I would have liked to have received back then. So we all have that internal thing, and it worked. It worked so well. And I even once, like my daughter, they had a little fight. My two daughters had a fight, and I kind of overreacted and blamed my eldest daughter. And then I dropped her off, and I was sitting at home, and I'm like, that wasn't right. She wasn't at fault as I thought I was in the moment. So I called up the school, and I had her come out, and I took her out to eat, and I apologized to her. And it was just funny because she comes out, because I was actually sitting there thinking, like, what if she doesn't want to talk to me again? Yeah. And it made me really scared. And so she was like, oh, I forgot all about that. Or, she came out, she was totally happy. But at the same time, it's like, she remembers sitting and me just modeling that accountability. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to you're the parent. You can take your kids out of school and just go have ice cream with them. You can do that and say, what? I could have been better to you today. I apologize to that. There was a video that went out too. It was on, it was one of these jump video. I don't like these things where they're kind of like testing people, but this one was really revealing. Mm-hmm. Where there was like this challenge where you go around and say to your partner, you could have been nicer to me today, And I was like, okay, how do people react? And a lot of them were defensive. But then they got to this guy who was like 60 years old, and he was just like, oh, I'm sorry. And he got up and he just gave her a hug. And I watched that, and I'm just like, oh, I wish somebody would do that for me. And then it's like, I can do that for somebody else. And that's really such a good, it's so easy. You're spinning your wheels. All you have to do is put yourself in another person's boots and guess what they would want. And you try to give them something. And even if it's not perfect, keep trying, keep giving them. Like you say, Nick, it feels good. And it gives you power to do things and be the person you want to be in this life. And so you don't have to be frustrated and causing pain. You can be spreading love and compassion.
Let yourself feel good when you are doing good things and making good choices. Like, normalize the idea of, Walter, you said it in there, was like, not celebrating. People don't celebrate the little things. That's what those who want to control, and it's only about what your faults are. Our saying in our house is celebrate the little things. Is we celebrate all of the little things. We celebrate when something small, like if you improved something that was hard on from your last report card, like you got a slightly better rating than you did before, or you overperformed your own expectations that you set for yourself. Like, my kids set expectations for themselves, and if they don't perform it, they get upset.
Yeah.
That said, we then celebrate the things that they did well during it. We make them see that there were important points. Like, it wasn't a competition that you maybe didn't do the best here. It was, you could learn from this. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Yes. And nobody can be perfect. but practice makes progress. And I think
Yeah.
that's the big one for us is practice makes progress. So you keep practicing, you'll keep progressing. And
Yeah. And
so
it
keep
and
evaluating.
and in line with that, it just occurred to me it's the journey, and you're assembling yourself. And then we focus on a destination. I just have to get here and then I'll be happy. And then every day that you're not there is a failure. That's just not an effective way to live. And if you're every day, it's like I did something today to make myself a better person, incrementally better every single day. So you're positive all the time, you're moving forward all the time, and empowers you. And yeah, we live in this whole society where we're always judged by whatever little artificial standards we probably haven't reached because all the standards aren't possible. And that's all by design to crush down on us and break us down so we're not capable of recognizing all the structures that are toxic and ghosting them like we should, or setting the boundaries that we need. So everybody, I mean, please have grace with yourself. As Will Fullwood always says, he doesn't blame people for being indoctrinated with white supremacy. That's put into you against your will. And so, yes, just as Nick says, find the little things, take joy, celebrate your victories every single day. We're not creating, we're creating the assembly line to make ourselves better people, and maintaining that assembly line is a daily victory, and the progress comes later. But yeah, don't be results oriented. Just maintain the good process, and good things will happen that way.
And not everything's a competition. Like,
Yes.
self reflect on yourself. It's not a competition. You're not competing against everybody else to be alive. You're working with each other. Um, and Walter is someone who you model that in so many ways for us. Um, and so here's where I want to get a little whimsical with you. And this is the final segment of this show before we get into letting Walter sell himself and how people can find him and promoting his work. Is this is the Mulan section? Is
Yeah.
this is the I'll make a man out of you, be a man, the clarion call for men? It's the Let's Go Girls for men. It's I'll make a man out of you, and it's a song that's stuck with me since Mulan came out. And we sang it a lot in high school and college. We know it. It's also got a lot of really good lessons in it that aren't just about physical growth. And I've taken the emotional growth and some of the other aspects out of it. So I've got some questions for you on from the chorus of the song, and I want to know your answers because they're fun. They're a little bit more playful, but they also reveal something about ourselves as we go through them. So, Walter, what does it mean to be as swift as a coursing river?
Oh, you know what isn't what's great about water? I mean, that it makes me think of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee. You see an obstacle, then obstacle stops, water goes around, and it's just I think too like the coursing river. There's that illusion, what power is, and in the United States, you think of force, but the reality is kindness is the more powerful force, and water can crash too, and it's being like water. I happen to be a water sign. It's one of those things. Not that I'm the most zodiac guy, but I've always liked the water sign thing. And I spend my time in the summer on the river as much as possible. There's something there that gives me peace. But I think yes, we too much have this idea of, it's weakness, and that's the other lie, because you're seeing it on display that this toxic patriarchal cruel thinking is the true weakness, and go back to like Russia's invading Ukraine. They thought they could just roll over the country because of their superior power and kindness. People, these are our homes, these are our families, this is a place we live, and they dug in, and you aren't able to go over them, and so they can oppose those things. And even though we look at water, go try and resist 2 feet of flowing water sometimes and see how tough you are.
Yeah.
There's so it's just that changing our perception of what is powerful. And it does seem like, we just have to overcome that sense that we're being weak by doing the right thing, which is what we're all tricked by, because the greater power in life is to hold yourself accountable and to, behave in a way, finding ways to go around obstacles, continuing on your path, continuing that assembly line to make yourself better. Yeah, I think that answers
I
that.
love it. I love it. I think that's great. I love the water breaks around the object, and I
Yes.
also understand exactly what you mean. We have a creek nearby
Whew. Yeah.
that are at my in-laws, and it's some of it's only a foot and a half deep, but
Oh,
it's fast and it's
yes.
hard. And then if you get into it, you just go whoop. You ever gone down a whitewater river like in a kayak? You know, water is tough. Like,
Oh, it's
don't mess with
dangerous.
water.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
We do river trips and we always do
oh,
life
I love that.
jackets. And last year we did
Mhm.
it when the water was super high. And normally this river trip takes 2 hours. It took us 45 minutes, and I like flipped over right away. The kids were laughing so hard, so it was a fun little adventure. But yeah, be on the
That's
water, but be
awesome.
safe.
So, next question. How do you embody the force of a great typhoon?
The force of a great typhoon. Be well by passing it on. I think. I guess I'm set to unleash a couple daughters onto the world that are not. They're not going to take it. They're kind, but they also do not take shit. And I think all the there's this whole other aspect of my writing that the world hasn't seen yet. All these books I've been writing for my kids, I should have the stack of them. It's this big, and
You should.
3 days. Yeah, oh, it's beautiful. And 3 days a week, at which we kind of settled into. I'll write these 3-page chapters for them, and I cover all the things. And it's been a lot of just stuff that's going on ends up defining the book, and it comes back from back to positive father figures. I think of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yep.
That's for Gen X. Harrison Ford and Sean Connery. Those are two father figures. And there is that moment in that movie where Sean Connery thought Indiana Jones has died. He said, "I never told him anything. 5 minutes would have been enough." And that stuck with me even when that movie came out. And it's like, okay, let's not get to that point where I regret that I didn't say the things to my kids that I wanted to say. And so I've deliberately lived by that. And it did take longer than 5 minutes, as it turns out, because I have things for them all the time. And I displace it from me because I put it in the form of a story that involves the dog. But yeah, my kids, they're a force of nature. And it makes me so proud.
And that's freaking awesome. I cannot wait for your daughters to be unleashed on the world
Oh,
as a force of accountability and positivity. Because my daughter's going to do the same, even if she
good,
doesn't realize it yet,
good.
even if she's timid right now and working through her anxieties and growing. She gonna kick some butt.
Yeah.
These girls are not, these young
Amen.
ladies are not gonna mess around. They know how to handle. And you know what? My son's gonna kick some butt too in a
Good,
positive way. Is he's
good.
gonna learn how to understand his emotions and how to unleash that accountability onto others. And he's already doing it. He's already done it. So I love
Good.
that you're unleashing your daughters as the force of the great typhoon and passing on, breaking the generational traumas,
Mm.
and moving forward. I think that's beautiful. Next, how are you as strong as a raging fire?
Hmm. I think it's just that resolve for personal accountability, and it's just all those deceits and all those things that appear to be the easier path, those pressures. At this point, that just gets tossed into the fire. That stuff's gone. I'm not listening to that anymore. Render it to ash, because I know at this point what the path is forward. I know what right action looks like, and I'm not going to be pressured to abandon that. And the more I think collectively as a society we learn the pressures that we inadvertently put upon other people, the more we learn to take those things out of our own behaviors and toss them into the trash heap of history and burn it so it's out of our culture. All these this it instructions on hostility and cruelty, we remove that. That's just part of the assembly line process by which we all become more empowered and compassionate.
I love it. Courtney is saying Walter in preacher mode is a raging fire in the best way.
Oh boy, haven't
Um,
done that in a while. It
I
makes
love
me
it.
dizzy.
Oh, I bet it does because you get into it. Um, and then the final question before we move into our goodbyes for the day is, how are you as mysterious as the dark
Mm.
side of the moon?
Yeah, that one's nice because I'd glanced at these. I'd forgotten the other one, but I remembered that one. And it's you got to be sparkly, and it goes back to Roald Dahl. Probably my favorite book by Roald Dahl is Danny the Champion of the World, and that's another beautiful model of a positive father-son relationship. And they called it being sparkly, where you have a little bit of mischief, and I'll do little things. My daughter caught me the other day because I'll set things up that are funny. We were playing poker and we had the music playing, and Freebird came on, the Leonard Skinner song.
Mm-hmm.
And so once we got done with poker, I'm like, oh, let's watch Elizabethtown. Because at the end of Elizabethtown, Freebird plays and like the sprinklers come on. And I just knew it's like I put it on, I'm just sitting there kind of laughing, anticipating this. And well, then when Freebird came, my kids look at me and my eldest, she's just like, Daddy, you set this up. so they're
You did
kind
this
of
on purpose, Dad.
they're starting. Well, and it's just that mystery in life. You kind of sprinkle around this little magic, and I'll do things like I'll take pictures and I'll just stick them into books and put the books on our shelves, and the kids will find them later. And I just leave little magic around, and that's the mystery, right? What, and even in the book I wrote for my kids, there's a couple spots, and this is something I'm not going to see, but it's going to be something that's beautiful because I'm hoping there'll be a day when they read these books to their own kids, and they're going to read these books that I've written to them, and they're going to have the memory of me reading it to them. But now they're also going to have the knowledge of an adult reading these books to a child, because there's a couple sections in there where the characters just express their love to their children, and it's going to hit them. And I'm just like, I won't see that, but I think, I don't know, that just makes me happy that exists in the world, that potential exists, because they're going to have, maybe I'll be gone at that point, and they'll read this and they'll know again, they'll be reminded again of my feelings for them. And so that's just this little, what do you call it? An Easter egg sitting there that I put on the river. It's floating down the flow of time, and they'll find it and open it, and it'll bring them joy. And people do things like that, and that brings me joy. I mean, from now until the end of my days, I'll have that little, I know that Easter egg's out there, and it's making me happy every moment. So do things like that for your kids.
If it makes you feel even better that this is a distinct possibility that can happen, is my grandfather wrote down poetry for my grandmother, and I have the book of that poetry and all of the poems he wrote her, and it will pass on, and it will be things that stick with them. And so thank you, Walter, for this incredible discussion. Thank you to all 357 people who are here on Substack with us, plus all of those on YouTube and Twitch with our other channels. Thank you so much for being here. I have to cut the conversation right at the hour because I've got Dr. Eric Lulov coming on next. But Walter, before we go, how can people find you? How can people support your work? How can people support the growth of your intelligent masculinity, and hopefully get those books so that we can share them with our kids too? Because I so want to read those books to my kids.
See,
my wife used to do something like that with our son, and I want to talk to you about it. And eventually I want her to get them written down. But maybe our daughter and your daughters can help draw for it.
Oh, that's the whole goal. And that's my kids. They've been doing the portraits of everybody to build that up. And it's just, this has been really fun because I know I'm building up a lot of interest in those books. Thank you. I mean, that's so great. And we'll figure it out. I want my kids to illustrate them yet too. And so we're working on that. We're getting there. But yeah, wonderful people. Yeah, if you can support me, just subscribe. I'm trying to be here. I mean, I try to answer the messages. If you message me and you're in crisis, I'll try to be there to help you. I mean, we've got this grassroots movement. We're on the fringes though, which is the sad part of this society. And there's just so many people out there that need to have this kind of role model and this kind of conversation and empowerment. So yeah, whatever you can do to support me is wonderful. We're an immigrant household, so I'm not leaving this fight. It's not like I'm just gonna, quit. This is going to continue to go until immigrants and all people in this country are treated well, and everybody needs the same treatment. And so, yeah, we're getting there. And I've really appreciated this conversation. I guess we got to hurry. I know Eric's waiting. We're already over a little bit. So
we're already over a moment. That's
whatever
okay.
You can do, come in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Walter. Thank you, everyone, again. And hop back on my next stream. We'll be closing this one and doing a new one with Dr. Eric Lulov. So hop back on here in a moment and you'll see me again. Thank you, Walter. Appreciate you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.